In last week's reading, the Pharisees had a cunning plan to trap Jesus. You'll remember the coin with the emperor's head and the question, is it against the law to pay taxes to the Roman emperor or not? Jesus' reply, pay the emperor what belongs to the emperor, and pay God what belongs to God. Amazed, we're told, the Pharisees left him and went away. They would be back, and they are back again this week with another trap, this time about the greatest commandment in the law. For the scribes and Pharisees, the law given by Moses from God was sacrosanct. There were 61 mitzvot, laws, in the Torah. But as scholars and rabbis interpreted these according to different times and circumstances, a huge body of oral tradition and oral laws began to emerge. In Jesus' day, the scribes and rabbis debated at some length about which of these were the more important. The Pharisees concluding that all were, as all came from God. Jesus seeks to end the growing practice of making God's law more and more complex. Simple and succinct was Jesus' approach. We've just heard the Great Commandment read. Like the story last week about paying taxes, Jesus' answer is now so familiar to us. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and love your neighbour as you love yourself. What could be simpler? Everything packaged in a memorable paragraph. Add the parable of the Good Samaritan to illustrate who my neighbour is, and I can leave it at that. Job done. On to the next hymn. I was reminded of the great English landscape painter J.M.W. Turner and his attempt at extreme brevity. Asked to address his fellow Royal Academicians about art, he stood up, cleared his throat, and said, "Art, it's a rummy business," and promptly sat down. I expect, though, that you're looking for more than that from me this morning. Not so simple, then. What can I say about this, the great commandment, that hasn't been said many, many times before? Let me try this. I'd like to take you on a journey up to Aberdeen. We're starting at the Castlegate, where King Street branches from Union Street at right angles and heads eventually towards Ellen Road. We pass the fire station, the old Domestic School of Science building. Now, a little further on, we're at our former house. On the corner of Pittodrie Place, it leads to a football stadium, a little-known team. You may have heard of them. Along a little further to King's College and the university on the left. Opposite stands St Mary's Church, where I was elder for 25 years. I mention it because it has a notice board and a nearby bus stop. Minister Mike Crawford used to supply me with pithy texts and memorable sayings week by week. I illustrated them with images and expressive lettering. The notice board had a wide daily audience. Students, pupils, folk going into work or to shop. My pupils at Old Macker Academy used to tell me when there was a poster they particularly liked. My favourites were the ones that made you stop and think a bit, the active ones. God feeds the ravens, but he doesn't put food in their nests. Prayer works, if you make it. Call on God, but row away from the rocks. And one last one. Love, the accurate estimate and supply of another person's needs. That sounds a little mechanistic, perhaps, but the current COVID-19 pandemic has called on us to do just that, to get to know our community, our neighbours, our congregation, to find out who needs what and who can help. You're on your own? Someone will telephone for a chat. You need shopping, but you can't get out. We can deliver. Give us the list. You want to worship, but the church building has had to close. Try Zoom. You don't have access to the internet. Someone can send worship materials through the post. Want to donate to the lodging house mission? The church building is open at certain times, Sunday and Tuesday. All these and many more are practical ways that folk have responded and continue to respond to other people's needs at the present time. Then there are the very personal, private interactions, only known to us and perhaps one other. A love of God that spills over into a love of neighbour. But let's look back at the passage again. Look at the conclusion of the Great Commandment. Love your neighbour as you love yourself. There was an excellent article in the Observer last Sunday by Noshin Ipkal under the headline, Months of Winter Lockdown Raise New Fears for UK's Mental Health. Health experts and charities have told the Observer the coming winter will devastate the mental well-being of the nation as lockdown uncertainty, fear, isolation and loneliness are exacerbated by the colder, darker months ahead. Professor Roshan Dasnair, a clinical psychologist from the Institute of Mental Health, is deeply concerned about the country being able to cope with the looming crisis. And not just adults. Polly Waite, in an Oxford University study into the health of children and adolescents during the pandemic, found that the number of children who would meet the threshold for clinical diagnosis had increased by 35% during the pandemic. And there's a domino effect. Elevated family stress in the coming months around finances, jobs, social restrictions, uncertainty, all pose a huge risk to children and adults alike. The Samaritans have already fielded more than 1 million calls during the pandemic, a quarter of them as a direct result of the virus. A spokesman said, it's essential that we look after our own mental health and that of others by continuing to check on one another and to share how we have been feeling. Doing good for others, checking in on neighbours and staying in contact with friends and family are proven to have positive mental health benefits alongside daily exercise and positive mental reframing. Loving your neighbour is good for you. as well as being good for your neighbour. But the commandment doesn't end with that. Let's remind ourselves, love your neighbour as you love yourself. As well as being a good neighbour, remember also to be good to yourself, to keep that essential trade-off between action for the benefit of others and a regard for what keeps you balanced, fit, and well. Remember to love yourself. Keep a space reserved for you in the busyness of each day, the things that give you pleasure, that relax and refresh you, that keep you even-keeled and functioning. So, I'll continue with Christian meditation, to practice yoga, to write creatively, to read and perform poetry, to make my own artworks, to get enough fresh air and rest, to listen to music and play the guitar, badly but enthusiastically, as I've done for the past 53 years, and play riotous games with my grandchildren. And I will continue to believe, despite everything, in a deep well of spiritual goodness that echoes and resonates throughout all creation, an unconquerable love. Amen.